how do we get this to transition from a sport that we love, a hobby sport, into something that's actually real and concrete? We got to build a foundation, and we see a lot of youth sports. Those are usually our farms and feeders that turn into great athletes. And I think that can be the same system for collegiate powerlifting. I am not a fed snob. If you lift and you train hard and you're a good athlete and you're a good kid, I don't give a shit if you lift in your backyard.
Time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Brad Bechel. He's the head powerlifting coach at McKendree University.
Yes, sir.
And Illinois State Chair of USAPL. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, I'm just checking. And you've been around the sport for a very long time, so I do kind of want to go back into the history here and then spend some time in the Army as well.
Yes, sir.
Overseas. And what I'm really super fascinated in is the collegiate powerlifting sector, because just maybe 5 yees ago, it came on my radar that there were certain universities that were offering scholarships. And it's like, are you kidding me? You know what? Because it's still kind of a little under the radar with that. And coming up through the sport for as long as I have, it's always been Olympics, you know, it's just never going to happen. We can talk about that later. But this, I mean, this is big. You know, it's a big deal.
I really think it is.
Yeah.
It is. I think it's just something that we, especially like you've been around for so long and you've seen like, hey, how do we get this to transition from a sport that we love, a hobby sport, into something that's actually real and concrete? And a big ideology I have is I think we got to build a foundation, and we see a lot of youth sports and peewee sports and that stuff. And those are usually our farms and feeders that turn into great athletes on the road. And I think that can be the same system for collegiate powerlifting. And the aspect of getting funding now, and it's recognized that there are so many powerlifters or federations or athletes out there that schools are like, hey, like we recognize this, it's a growing sport, let's get behind it. And that's something I am really proud of. The university I work for, McKendree University, is how much they've supported the growth of powerlifting so far. When I took over the team in 2021, we had, right after COVID, 11 kids, and amazing 11 kids for them to stick around. And after the team, essentially after COVID, that was almost non-existent. And to turn into 47 this year is insane to me. So, but just to be able to get these kids funding to pay for their education to compete and to powerlift is something I never would have thought of happened 10, 15 years ago when I was really getting into it.
There's so much more to this that we'll talk about here in a little bit that really appeals to me as far as the growth of the sport. Before we get into that, I have a gift for you here.
Thank you.
So in that bag, there's Element Packs. They're one of our sponsors. Link in the description. And there's a training log notebook. Pioneer, who makes a lot of our belts, I had make those books. And in that book, there's a coin. And that coin is something that I've been giving people over the past 5 years. Can't buy it, you got to earn it. That I feel represent the aim of the company, which is to live, learn, and pass on. Yeah. And you most certainly do that.
This is so military-esque to me. Yeah. Dude, it makes me so warm inside, Dave. Thank you so much.
Well, I wanted to say challenge coin, right? Yeah, but it's really not, because it's more like a reward coin.
But this means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, significance of it and everything. And Pioneer does our team belts too. I support them. They're amazing. But that's very close to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do. Let's jump back into your roots, because I think when I was going through the notes here, you began powerlifting at the age of 14.
Yes, sir.
Right. And obviously open powerlifting is not showing that because it's like high school meets or so forth.
Yes.
Why did you start? Were you in other sports and started powerlifting to be able to help those sports?
Mm-hmm. So I originally, I was a out of shape fat kid from like 3rd grade to like 8th.
How out of shape?
Oh, I was as round as I was tall. It was bad. And I grew up on a farm. So like we grew up on like butter and mashed potatoes and beef. Like, so it was just, I was being fed plenty, but I did not have the workload to like burn off those calories. So even with working on the farm, once I went into high school, hit a growth spurt, stayed 200 and grew like 4 or 5 inches. And then football essentially was my gateway to weight training. From there, I had 2 coaches that were just really big they were big into the combine bench press, and they were big into power cleans. I didn't get into squats and deadlifts until later into the service. So the first meet that I went to was, I came into high school in 2000, and there was the old football coach. He had just left, Coach Welker from Roxana High School in Southern Illinois. He put together a phenomenal football team for a while through them, but he essentially hosted the first powerlifting meet that I was aware of when he transitioned to Roxana. And when I went in, I was invited to it, and all I knew was kind of like a lineman press. So a very, very close grip, just shoulder width apart. And that's how I learned to start to bench press. And then the coach was like, oh, you kind of have good bench press. You should go into this. So I went down there, and that was the first sight I had saw of equip lifting. And it was, I had never seen it. I came from a school of, there were 44 kids in my graduating class, so a tiny school. So when I went to this first meet and I saw people in squat suits and wraps and stuff, it was like, what is this? It was.
Now, did you do the full meet? Because it kind of sounds like you were just benching.
I did push pull on it.
Okay.
Push pull.
Okay.
And I did well with bench, ass at deadlift, and that's the story of my career with powerlifting as well.
Yeah.
So
deadlift.
But no, I did well at bench. At the time, at least with the competition there. And I ended up taking first my weight class, and then I kind of just fell in love with it. And then from there, I started training more lifts, we didn't really have internet, whereas it was awful dial up. And then if we did get something, it was at half an hour, whatever, to get a page through. So the only stuff that I had access to was like muscle and fitness and men's health, and then muscle and fitness eventually turned into like muscle development and stuff like that. And then John Meadows and all those guys led me to YouTube and you guys. And that's why when I look now, like from where I started, and you guys were a major point of impact of like powerlifting. It was one of the first introductions, even 20 years ago, I feel.
Yeah.
And so I went in from basic powerlifting from high school. I competed every year up until I was a senior. Got okay. By the time I was a senior, I benched, I think 345, nothing nuts. And then other 2 lifts again were not good. Decided I was not a good student at all. And I was one of these students. I think that's why this comes full circle for me working at a university too. I was a dog shit student. I didn't have the GPA to be able to get into school. My parents did not make the money to send me to school without putting themselves in debt. And it was just a really bad situation. Like, hey, what do I do from there? And you're 18 years old, and you either, where I'm from, you go work for a union labor, you go work for a farm, or you go military. And my option was essentially military, because it's the other ones just did not line up with what I wanted to do. I always had a passion for kind of, once I started training, like that physical fitness aspect of it. And that's what kind of pushed me more to the service stuff. I was like, I like to be in shape. I think, I would say combat would be cool at a young age, but like when you look at service, when you're a young man during that time, I think it was more appealing than some of the other routes that I had. So joined the service, 2005 to 2009. During that time, my team leader, Keith Ruffin, was a really good lifter, just a solid lifter. He was the first guy I ever saw bench 500 raw. And he was somebody around 220, 200 pounds in between there often. But he really started to push me in how I benched and how I lifted and more technique. And that was kind of my first real coach in the aspect of powerlifting development.
Now, was this here or overseas?
Overseas. Yep. He was somebody that I met in Germany at my first duty station. We deployed to Iraq together. And then during that time, any downtime we had, we would train together. And he taught me, so much my foundation with lifting.
What was the setup in Iraq? Well, I've had a few people on, and some surprisingly, the setup was a lot better than what I thought it was going to be.
So we moved multiple times. We moved about 4 or 5 times. Our first operating post was Rustamaya. And Rustamaya had this, I don't know, maybe like 30 by 40 gym. They had some dumbbells, 1 bench, squat rack, T-bar row, just basic stuff we could use. So it was all our compound movements we could essentially do and be good with. We moved to a base called Shield, Fob Shield, and it was awesome. It had hammer strength and select tech, but we were there for about a month, so we got spoiled, loved it, and then after that we went to the old Ministry Defense. Essentially, that facility was taken over. There was no gym in that building before, anyway, so they had sandbags outside. They had some stuff they had taken, kind of like from the economy that they brought in. The old plates filled with sand, that type of stuff, and that was essentially what we trained with. So just made it work.
So you end up having this very interesting periodization model that's forming based upon where you're at.
Yeah.
Going back to the high school era, I believe you have your association, you got a bachelor's, is that correct?
Yes, in healthcare management.
Okay. So looking back when you were in high school, because I was the same way. Like I graduated with whatever the point over what you needed to graduate is what I had.
Yep.
Right. And looking back, I just realized I was lazy, you know, but I had a lot of people putting me in learning disability classes and all the other kind of stuff. But that is what that is. You know, I don't blame them. I think their intentions were good. You know, they were trying to help, but a lot of it was playing into my own mind. Like I'm just stupid. And, you know, all this other. Was that the same type of thing? Because once you then go back when you're older and a little more mature.
Yeah.
Especially at a university.
I was a shitty student. Yeah. There's no way where, like you're saying, like you were lazy when you look back at it. If we can put the energy into what we love, right? Like to lifting and to coaching, and we put a fraction of that effort into school, we would have been fine. And that's like, I had speech classes up until I was in 5th grade. It was learning issues as I went through too. And I do think part of me was not applying myself the way that I could have. But yeah, I definitely think if it would have been I've been not so lazy, I would have taken it more seriously or understood there was maybe something that I wanted to do after, it would have changed the direction of my effort. So if I would have known how much I was enjoying lifting, say as a freshman or sophomore, but I wasn't going to be a football player or a baseball player, but I was a young man that was like, or a young woman that wants to be, hey, I want to go do a sport. This is a new avenue. And for me, that probably would have been like, oh, hell, like, let me lock in. Let me figure out how do I get this destination? Because I was a very, I guess, event motivated child. Like I would go from like, okay, well, it's baseball season or basketball season. I would train my ass off for those, or, hey, we need to go make sales for this, for a fundraiser. Like I would do those things.
When I look back to and reframe it, right? It's the biggest takeaway I had from that time was, I was lazy in that regard, but I wasn't allowed to quit. You know what I'm saying? So you always knew that one way or another, you were still going to finish. Because not graduating is like really not the option.
It's not.
So it's, in a way, I think that built more of a don't quit mentality. You know, that plays off.
My parents were very hard on my ass with that concept of, if you start something, you finish it. Doesn't matter if you end up hating it. Like you made a commitment to it, you follow it through. And I've still like, and I respect my parents all the way through. Like I've ridden that concept out my entire life. If I've made a commitment to a job or a time frame or contracts, like I write it out. So
that brings back a memory. I played multiple sports when I was growing up, and I decided to play soccer, right? And I had seasonal asthma or whatever. This is before I was tested where they put like 1 million dots on your back and you pin the shit out of you to figure out what you're allergic to. And I had allergy shots for, I don't know, 6 years or some shit. But the first day of soccer, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die, right? Because I just did not have the ability to breathe and all that. And my father was that way. It's like, nope, you started. And I'm like, it's it's the first day, man. This is like tryouts, man.
Cut me some slack. Maybe I made a bad decision here.
Fucking miserable. But the takeaway, you know, at those young ages, that takeaway is huge, you know, because it locks you into whatever that is. I mean, later in life, I think, you know, there's probably, you're probably the same. There's some things that we get involved in that we probably should quit. But you're so locked in, and having a powerlifting mentality makes it even worse. Because you want to strive for that metric.
Perfection, or how do I fix this problem? And I think it's something when we look at it, like you're saying, like, how do I, all right, that's a powerlifter aspect of, I don't want to be bad at this. How do I address it? How do I get good at it? And I agree with it.
Now, when you went into the military, how did that impact the discipline?
Honestly, I look back and deployment was hard, but the concept of structure, what values were on at least the basic level. I know sometimes there's always gonna be your outliers of people who can be shitbags, but just the basic level that I learned from the service and stuff, it was some of the best time of my life. The discipline of being accountable. Hey, we have PT at 4:30, or we're going to go for a 10-mile run at 6, and just be ready. And how you're saying that first day of soccer, when I went to Germany, it was, I went to Missouri for my basic training. I went to Germany. Elevation was significantly different. And they're like, all right, first week, you guys are new privates, strap up. And we would go to run, and elevation is so much higher. We're dying. Like, cannot keep pace with them. And you're like, you guys are out of shape. We're like, where the hell are we? This is not normal. So yeah, it was a really cool experience for the discipline aspect, because it made me understand setting routine can benefit you in so many other ways. And the structure of the service, from, hey, PT to lunch to, hey, we have this project we're doing, or motor pool. A lot of my days were laid out very early on, where structure became habit. And that set me up for later in life. And I think now, even in my program, when we look at how the kids schedule their classes around our practices and stuff like that, I like structure. I like accountability from my side to make sure flow happens. And I think the service was a big part of that for me.
How much of your time when you're in it's kind of, I don't know how it's exactly referred to, but the way I kind of refer to it is you spend a lot of time waiting to wait to be able to know where you're going to go.
Yes.
So you're not really doing anything.
Yeah.
But you still have this structure, but there's a lot of uncertainty because you don't know where you're going to go.
Yeah. Until
you go.
100%.
And then that can change.
I am a scenario-based person, so my head is my own worst enemy. So in that aspect, like, I'll plan, I don't know, like, well, hell, season's not till fall, and I already have this game plan essentially structure, and I'll revisit that probably 5 or 6 times, like, before we even get to that point. It is something that I understand that there are a lot of moving wheels in the equation, moving gears in this motor or mechanism. So I have to make sure they all line up. So me revisiting and being accountable on my own end, or providing that structure for myself, is definitely made this aspect of coaching a lot easier.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah,
right.
There are
more. You can control more.
Yeah, and at this age group, it is that's one thing is, I think, when I account for programming, is the age group is a variable that I have to account for. These kids are going to be the ones that, like, hey, it's an RP8. Why the fuck do we just hit a 10? Why are we buried on that? So me understanding essentially the athlete I'm working with, the age demographic, the environment they're in, like, maybe I need to run them a little sub RPE, knowing they're going to overshoot purposefully, but you can't turn a 7 into a 10 and justify that in conversation. So I think a lot of that, and understanding, like, who I'm working with, dictates the structure as well.
So with your own training, when did powerlifting become like, this is the thing?
I got medically discharged from the service. I suffered a spinal injury, got hit from a vehicle from behind, spondylo, I almost say it wrong, spondylolisthesis. It's the bilateral fractures with the vertebrae shift. Had that, got medically discharged. Told me I wouldn't lift any more than like 25 to 45 pounds the rest of my life. You know how?
Oh yeah, the 40 pounds.
The bullshit.
It's always 40 pounds.
And I operate on spite a lot of the time too. If you tell me I can't do something, I sure as hell will find a way to do it. It was painful, especially like long term. When I went back, I had a 10-year follow up, and I didn't do surgery for it. I wanted to try to do as much of what I could do on my own. I conditioned my core. It may not look like it now as I've gotten older, but I was super hard on core. I was bracing, impact carries, all that stuff that could essentially make my spine not move. I implemented that to training. So I'll circle back to that with training with the spine. But like, a lot of growing up on the farm, was my first introduction to strength sports was strongman. So like Mariusz Pudzianowski and those guys. So like, just seeing that, being on a farm, I was a nerd. I was like, oh, these hay bales, yeah, I'm gonna carry them as far as I can. Just silly stuff like that.
I mean, that's always a weird one to me, because I did a lot of that stuff. We didn't have a farm, but friends had farms and shit. And I would look at the strongman when I'm younger. I'm like, fuck that, man. That's like the labor shit I don't even like to do.
Yeah.
Like at least the weight room is something, but you embrace that.
I loved it. My uncle did roofing and he would have me carry shingles up the ladders. I was like, fuck yeah. It's like my legs would be throbbing and I would just be tired. And it was just something that I absolutely loved. There's a point, and I'm going to share this interview with my dad. And there's a point, my dad was such a tight ass, he wouldn't fix your tractor, and we had round bales. And his ass was like, oh, it's fine. He's like, it's not far. You can flip them out to our field. Dave, this is like 50 yards away, and this round bale is, dude, it's taller than I am. They're heavy and they're wet. So of course they're more heavy. Yeah. So like in that moment, I was like, okay, it's like, then I turned that into a game. A lot of what I was bad at, I just tried to be like, okay, like how do I get better at it through like making it fun or making it a game or something like that. And being on that farm made it a lot easier. Yeah. And then back to the back injury, I started implementing a shit ton of carries immediately. I started doing a lot of mobility for my hips because I did have a very good PT, and he broke it down for me immediately. He's like, look, he goes, one's supposed to provide movement and one's supposed to provide essentially support. Yeah. And he's like, and your back is doing way too much of the movement and your hips need to be more mobile. And from then I implemented a lot of high bar squatting because that was the one thing I looked in literature, like it helps improve hip mobility. So those were all things when I started to return to training, I did things that could actually benefit kind of that back position. I fell in love with high bar, and all my athletes know that. They hate it, but I love the concept for core training, the overall longer range of motion that you have to work on, and I felt it paid dividends what happened to my trunk, and I'm a strong believer in it.
I like the way this one feels. Allowing me to load this through my hips and keep myself as upright as I can. I'm able to activate a little more quadricep, glute, actual focus on my leg work instead of a little more of my posterior chain taking over.
How you doing? Matt Goodwin, elitefts.com, equipment sales. Today we're looking at the EliteFTS Tiger Belt Squat. This one is actually shown with our bell tower weight storage on the back. That's a custom unit piece that we'll add on to this if you guys would like. It does not come standard. Come standard would just be the belt squat, no weight storage. The cool thing about this is we have the adjustable safety spotter arms. So you can do barbell movements in here as well. So not only can you squat with the weight loaded on your hips, we can also do barbell complexes in here as well, which kind of makes it nice. It gives you multifacet on this. We have the motorcycle grip handles here. That way, when you're squatting on these, you can hold on to something. If you get buried at the bottom, it's nice to grab on and kind of pull yourself back up. This is also shown with the optional box squat attachment. When you buy this, you get all 3 levels of pads with the stem as well. The other thing cool about this is we do band pegs. We put band pegs on everything. Dave loves band pegs. So we have band pegs throughout. So you can deload or you can add accommodating resistance to this as well. We have a rubber platform on this. When this is delivered, it's basically all on one pallet. The actual belt squat unit will be kind of pulled over on top of it, so it's all one piece. When you get it in your facility, all you do is take off the slider mechanism, bolt it to 2 bolts on the top here, 2 bolts on the bottom, run the cable, you're done. Super easy. This is available in all kinds of custom colors and logos. So we have the EliteFTS plate laser cut here. This can be your logo. So all we need is a vector file. We can mock this up for you, different colors, and show different options for you guys. So we can get your school on here, your gym name, your home gym, whatever you guys want. We can change this from EliteFTS to your logo as well. So if you guys have any questions, you can always reach me directly. It's mgoodwin@elitefts.net, or you can go to www.elitefts.com. Hit the equipment list. It'll drop down to plate loaded. This will be listed in there. Really cool piece, guys. Awesome for any kind of training facility. I highly recommend it. Buy it from us.
So once I got back from the back injury and continued training on that, sorry, I had a brain fart. Yeah. Once I got back from the back injury and started rehabbing from that portion, the
back injury, then getting into the powerlifting again.
I didn't get back into it, Dave, probably till I got out in 2009, and I didn't do my first meet again until 2014.
Yeah.
So time frame wise, it took me probably 5 or 6 years to essentially like recondition myself back.
During that time, did you have your eye on that prize?
No.
Or was it just getting your back better?
That's the doctors made everything sound so detrimental that my entire aspect was, and I was a very young father. I had my daughter at 24. So like being out of the service and having her and then trying to figure out injury was very difficult because I couldn't prioritize my training and not prioritize my family.
Yeah.
So, and that was for me, like I had to figure that out. So during that rehab time, I never really thought about how do I compete again? How do I go and like pursue powerlifting? Because even when I was over in Germany, the aspect of like IPF was not visible to me. So I never got to really like check out on that and then go down that path while I was there. We had small meets on post, but that was just bros being bros.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, once I came back and then I rehabbed with my daughter, I did the first meet back 2014 and it was just general training and getting healthy. I ran a lot, did a lot of mobility, just general fitness stuff, but nothing powerlifting specific or focused.
And what were you doing during that time? Was that when you were in college?
I went, once I got out, I was 24, 25 when I went back because Zoe's my daughter's name. When I got back from the service, I was 24, then we had her. Yeah. So I was 25 back in school. I went for physical therapy assistant was what I originally pursued first off.
Now, was that because of the back?
It was 100%, Dave, 100%. I wanted to know why they were telling me what was going on with me. And for me to just be so focused on how do I get my body better to pick my career path, I thought was like the perfect thing for me to do. And I still loved lifting. I still liked exercise. I loved implementing all that in my day-to-day life. But now having it on, hey, I can turn this into more of the professional side of it and kind of push like, hey, I'm getting older. How do I turn, I guess like, I didn't look at myself as a coach until later, but how do I give myself some credibility if I want to coach or training or whatnot? And I thought adding rehab into my toolbox, bag of tools, like that would be very useful. So I went through, did that. I graduated from there in 2014. I went to work for BJC, Barnes Jewish Healthcare System, until 2018. From there, I went and worked at a VA for the year, and it destroyed me. It was, and the VA, some of the workers are some of the hardest working people. The concept of free healthcare is amazing, but there's so many people that get lost in the system. It broke me. Just like walking people to essentially like, hey, until they pass away or they can't find a home for you for some individuals, it was very sad. So it pushed me out of healthcare, but I won't say a blessing in disguise with how hard it was there, but in 2019, the assistant position opened at McKendree. And I was just so unhappy with the VA. It just transitioned. It was no brainer.
How were you aware that opened?
Guillermo Blanco was the head coach before me. He had just taken over the role of that position in 2019. From my understanding, he looked on social media at local coaches who would want to help, found me, talked to some local people that may have known me, and then just interviewed me and asked if I wanted to help. And from there, I did.
What were you doing at that time for him to be able to find you? Right, because you said he was looking for local coaches.
Competing, and then adding to my athlete roster. I was local. I opened a gym in 2014.
Okay, there it is. All right. I'm trying to figure out like how would he know? Like there's something missing here.
Yeah, I opened a gym in 2014 called The Bar in Swansea, Illinois. I ended up selling that when I went to work for the VA. So while I was there, I had started competing myself, found the best training partner I ever had in my life, Cody Porter, and we just, when we were together, it was just like unstoppable training. It was, and you've had those training partners over the year, like they make you better just being around them. So during that time, I went from, I think, a 407, 424 bench, and then getting with Cody, I pushed to 485, like just started training together. And then during that time, Cody and I were both like, hey, we need a coach. Like we have potential potentially. And ended up getting with Josh Bryant. And Josh is, when I look at mentors or people that had the most impact on my coaching career, he's definitely one of those individuals. He took me to my best total ever, my highest dots ever, and got me to break the 500-pound bench barrier raw. So
now that was, you were competing in USAPL at the time?
I did USAPL getting back, and then I transitioned to USPA. USAPL did not have much of a presence in our area. So once we started competing again, we were driving to Kentucky and Chicago and all these other areas because we didn't, during St. Louis, around St. Louis during that time, there was not a whole lot of powerlifting except like 2 meets a year, and they were USAPL, and I want to say it was an old boys club, but it was an old boys club.
Yeah.
Like if you weren't a part of them, you weren't kind of welcome, or if you did show up, you're like, why the hell are you here type stuff.
No, but I think that's a variable that when people look, and not so much today as it has been in years past, I was going to say look at judge, and they don't take that into consideration, that a lot of the powerlifters, athletes end up in federations because of geographic reasons.
And it sucks.
It could be the USAPL, it could be whatever it's going to be, but it was just the closest.
Yeah.
And it was the only thing that they knew.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's what it is. They know somebody that competes in X federation. They don't know there's 100 other federations.
Yeah.
So that's just the pipeline that they end up in. The same way that you end up in a certain high school or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And then the more that you're in it, the more you see then you can start to make choices based upon where you want to go.
Yeah.
But
the
roots matter, right? Because for a lot of people, that's where they stay the whole time.
100%, because if you have a good experience from the beginning, why are you going to change? And that's when I'm like, I am a supporter of powerlifting, not a federation person. Even though I'm in this position with USAPL, the moment that USAPL that I feel is not doing the best for the athletes, I don't have ties to them. My ties and commitment will always be to the sport and to my athletes having the best experience and what is the best route, what I feel for the sport. And from my end, I want it to be professional. I want us to someday look back, us have a coaching hall of fame that is legit. I want us to be able to hey, maybe retire a singlet number or something like that. I would love to be able to do those things where we have, and Brady Stewart at McKendree, we have a hall of fame, and he is the only power lifter that is recognized through their gold plaque, gold faced. He went on to win, I think IPF, the Arnold in 2015, 16, 17, one of those, but he benched like 720 something single ply. Yeah. So Brady is a phenomenal USAPL athlete from around the area, went to McKendree. It was just really cool to see hey, there is this route now where they can be recognized on this in this hyper professional level, and to be on our Hall of Fame in the school on a gold plaque. I thought that was pretty cool. And I think we can carry that along in many other aspects of the sport.
So the gym, and you're competing and then working with some of the other lifters that were in your gym, is what positioned you to be on the radar, to be the assistant strength coach.
Yes, sir.
There.
Correct.
All right. And then he reached out to you.
Yep.
All right. Then what's going through your mind at that time? Like, what the hell, a university has a strength?
That's what I thought. I was like, he said the university has a powerlifting team. I had known about it because geographically where we're located, McKendree's powerlifting team started in 2013. So I knew that it was there. I didn't know it was scholarship giving until I ended up to go to work for him.
All right.
So they had hosted meets. I had sent athletes there for a couple of years. I met at the time our current assistant coach. I had met during one of those McKendree meets. But yes, that during that time frame, he ended up finding me through the gym. I ended up going up there and doing 2 years. COVID hit, and it really threw a wrench in my plans. COVID killed the school, like essentially all our funding. My first year was an unpaid internship, and that was fine. I was coaching privately. I was like, I can handle that. And then COVID hit, and year two, they're like, hey, we can't give you a paid position. And I love the kid, love coaching the kids. I love that age demographic. I love the amount of strength we can produce and structure we can provide at that age. And it was hard for me not to say I would still help. So even though they told me, hey, another year, I was like, all right, that's fine. We'll figure it out. I helped coach some of the kids from the distance with COVID policies and stuff that we could. The kids went on that year. Emmett Mesger became national champion that year. Tyler Branson placed top 3. It was just a really good year to kind of okay, is this worth doing this? And the kids performed amazing on the platform.
But you make a really important point, because that's how a lot of coaches, or a lot of people that are just in strength and conditioning in general, will push back, especially now, will push back real hard. No, I'm not going to do that for free. I'm not going to do an internship for free, or whatever it's going to be. And then actually never get in. It's the story most of the time. Or they're going to end up someplace else, where they might be getting paid a little bit, but they're never going to be able to advance because they're not in a certain position.
Correct.
Where sometimes the best advice is figure out where you want to go, and then go work for free until you're able to prove, the financial
make your position.
For that, and then stick it out, and it can be there. But that's just to say that alone, people are like, no, fuck that, I'm not doing that. Okay, fine.
I was very fortunate enough to have the base of my clientele from coaching when I took that leap into like, this is what I want to do. And I am a strong believer, like with jobs and stuff like that, like with what you're saying, like make yourself valuable where they have to recognize and make a position for you. And that's essentially what it was. When I took over in 2021, the program was at the point we had such loss of funding from COVID that they're like, hey, we're going to give the program a trial year. We're going to see how you guys do with funding and recruiting. And essentially like that's something I've never really discussed with the kids, but like we've been 4 years on the up and up. I think it's good to say now. Our recruiting numbers are on all-time high. Our funding's at its highest. Like the school is, just overall levels of admittance is at its highest. So to look at where we came from and where we're at is really, really cool to me.
No, but it's, well, I guess what I'm kind of pushing on, and I don't want to go into a big rant about this, but you could sit back and say, well, here's what my worth is. You know, it's $50 an hour or whatever it's going to be, but that's not what the market worth for you is.
And then again, you talked about location. What is your market value in that location?
Yes.
And our location is not East Coast, West Coast, where fitness and sports are insane. We're not in this super rich city. Like I understand my investment, but also like my passion for the sport kind of helps me bridge that pay or discrepancy or what my worth is. And the school has met me where I'm happy with, but originally it was the 2 first years unpaid, a disgusting other 2 years, but it was purely fueled by like, I know my worth. I can get my worth. And at the end of the day, with me busting my ass, I got it. I got it.
And it may have happened sooner. I mean, there was a pandemic that was impacting the universities in a major way that you had no control over.
And I think Guillermo would have had a phenomenal team riding through it if COVID wouldn't have had such a setback for the university.
Now, how did he go about, because a lot of universities, hell, even when I was in college, would have powerlifting clubs, right? It's just either a piece of the rec center or whatever it's going to be. Some even had separate rooms that were just for that. How did he go from making that a club into a recognized sport? It's
been the hard work of the 3 or 4 coaches from all of us. Like funding originally started off non-existent. We've had programs start in 2013. There were 4 head coaches total, myself, Guillermo, Joyner, and 2 others before. But I've been there since 4 years. So the other Joyner, I believe, he did great recruiting. He had just really good, I think, marketing for the team. He got them out there, and that was when they were still with the IPF before the break with USAPL. So just the market, I think, that he was able, to recruit from and to bring in made the school recognize, like, you're very competitive immediately, because he did do really great recruiting. Within his first 2 years, he recruited a young lady, Lindsay Raker, and she became national champion. So he did have a good eye for like talent and strength and conditioning. And
no, on the other end, is he working funds? I mean,
no, and that's where it's at. It's like it was always a strength and conditioning coach / powerlifting coach. So these guys were having to work full time during the day, and then strength coach, and then do powerlifting on the side, and then how to figure out how to fundraise. That's where I came in, and funding changed. Those guys had so much on their plate, they could not do anything to help bring in outside additional funds.
Yeah,
me coming from helping. I mean, at the time we helped IPL run the North American Championships and WRPF and a bunch of other meets that the school had helped with. We were able to generate revenue to show the school like, hey, we don't just have an increasing roster, but now we have funding coming in that we are generating from the outside. And when a school, and we have to look at it as a business as much as we don't want to, you can't be bleeding.
No, but going back to the market value we were talking about, you have to.
And that was my immediate thought is, how do I get us money to justify we're worth what we are?
Yeah.
And so I started having the kids. At the time we had 11 kids. I'm like, hey, we're gonna go spot and load. And my ass would spot and load with them. Like I'd be back spotter, side spotter. We're gonna go make some money. And by the end of the year, we're gonna raise $3,000. Okay. Next year, we're gonna make $6,000 and so on. And our fundraising, by the end of last year, we raised $30,000 in fundraising funds for a powerlifting team of 36. That's nuts to me. So, and the school looks at that and now they're like, oh, well, your team size growing. You're bringing in this consistently increasing funding to the school. We can get back to you. You've secured at least X amount guaranteed yearly that we can put that into your program. And that's what's happening. Our recruiting amount has been able to go up per athlete, per dollar amount per student. So that to me makes me very happy. At no point will I bring a kid in, you're a talented kid, but knowing that I'm going to put them in a large amount of financial debt just because. If you come in and you have a low GPA, like stats say if you have under a 3.0, you're most likely not going to make it to graduation. And that's not being rude. That's not being mean.
Yeah.
That's stats. And for me, if I pursue an athlete under that GPA, I'm setting them up for failure, right? And I will talk to kids early on. I start recruiting sophomore, junior, for even freshman year. I have conversations with, get your GPA up so I can help in these situations. And then based off of how our GPA does and how we can get additional funding there, we have private scholarships for powerlifting now. So I don't want to disclose our amount because there are rival schools, but like it's a good amount now that we can give kids.
How many rival schools in general are there? Because it's not just...
I don't mind listing them. The coaches that are there, like if we look top tier, Midland University and Tim Anderson has done what no other school has been able to do in collegiate powerlifting. Like he has got a full roster, full backups. He's got equipped men's, women's, raw for both. And when you look at it, his structure of winning, his turnovers, his top athletes, whatever they're doing is it's correct. And that essentially, I saw what they're doing. I was like, okay, well, how are they doing that? And I would pay attention to it. And I was like, the best form of, flattery is mockery or whatever it is, or thing. I can't. Yeah. I know.
Imitation
is the best form of flattery.
Yeah. But there's another key topic there too, because you could look at that and despise it, like fuck these guys and all that, but not try to learn from what they're actually doing. Yeah. And a lot of people do this just with their lifters do this with competitors that they see 100%. On social media. Instead of trying to figure out and learn, how they got there.
Be a sponge.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Like, even if I don't like an athlete, like, how did he get strong though? I don't like you as a person. That's fine. You can have that. But like, how did you get to where you're at? And I'm going to listen to that and try to bring that in. But with him, like, I respect him as a coach. So it's easier for me to look to that model and be like, oh, damn, they're doing X, Y, and Z, and that's working beautifully. Well, how can we put our own flavor on this or kind of make that better? Yeah. Stuff like that. From Midland, then it goes to our Texas. Texas has huge high school powerlifting. So when we looked at placement last year, UTSA took first. And overall raw, and then Midland took second. Third was Texas A&M. Fourth was us, and fifth was Friends University for male raw. So when we look at those teams, Tim has been around and winning, I want to say, since like before 2015. He still competes competitively in equipped bench. Jen Thompson is one of their assistant coach. They just have a great program. Then you work down to UTSA. UTSA is a club, but the club is ran within Wes Zunker's TSS. So you literally have the all Texas equipment, everything you need. You have the previous state chair there. Like, you're being set up for success. And Texas in-state tuition, very, very hard to rival with scholarships. They just have very good in-state tuition. So when we look at that, the Texas schools normally produce a lot of very top-tier athletes, national champions annually. They're just very good. And then we're this little solo team outside of St. Louis with, barely 50 kids that for the last 5 years, we've podied them. So we went fifth, and then fourth this last year. So
subtopic, because you said Texas, something that's always intrigued me was, because the high school powerlifting there is next level. It's not even next level. It's like 10 levels higher, right? Why do the kids not continue after high school? It's such a small percentage of them that just never powerlift again.
Friday Night Lights.
Is that what it is?
No kidding. Like, they are football. They are primary Division I sport driven kids. So they're looking, even if it's a D3 or whatnot for football, that's where you're going to get like, oh, I went and played football, or I went and played baseball. That's where they're looking.
So the powerlifting's feeding football.
Yeah, powerlifting feeds football, like that stuff. Like, but just because they know it is more of a, I don't want to say higher echelon sport on a collegiate stage, that's where they're navigating to. So even if it is I would say lower tier school on, say, Division I, II, whatnot, and Division I's aren't giving powerlifting scholarships. They have their bread and butters of all the traditional sports. It's your Division IIs right now that are seeing kind of powerlifting be more prominent in Louisiana, Mississippi, even Florida now, because they have a hybrid of Olympic lifting and powerlifting down there. And Texas, like those D2 schools are seeing like, powerlifting is not expensive to operate. You could literally throw them in your strength and conditioning facility and just have them lift there. And a lot of schools are recognizing that. They're like, well, let's just make a team based off that, and they'll get additional 50, 60 kids from enrollment.
All right. So it's to circle back to one of the things I wanted to talk about, the downstream effects. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to go a little deeper into this. Is if kids know that the opportunity is there to be able to get a scholarship, right, or partial scholarship or whatever, even if it's books and food or whatever, you know, and in collegiate powerlifting, right, then that provides that opportunity for them to strive to be able to get that, right? And a lot of kids, I think not enough know that it's available, right? So you should have thousands of applicants. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't have to worry about recruiting. You should have thousands of applicants just because there's so many. So there is that downstream impact. And while you say you're not really federation specific, are you really though? Because you have the Collegiate Nationals, which fall under the USAPL, which has to play some impact
on how I recruit?
Well, not on how you compete. Right. Okay. You get what I'm saying? Because you don't want to take your team and compete in, you know, I don't want to give different federations, X, Y, and Z's, Collegiate Nationals, which isn't really even a Collegiate National. It's just got a division, you know.
When I look at it in that manner, I'll look at it and like, hey, the Collegiate Nationals are, for say wrestling, our biggest tournament that we could do of the year, right? So if my kids want to in the off season go play on a deadlift bar or kabuki bar and they want to compete, I still support it in that manner. Just for the level of competition, I'm a person where you go where best competition is. If you're going to lose, you're going to lose to the best. And in that regard, there are so many kids in USAPL in that collegiate range. That's where I'm going to put them for at least the collegiate bracket.
So that just brought something up. I don't want to get into federation politics, but the split from the USAPL from the IPF, that wouldn't actually be, you wouldn't actually be able to do that if it was still under the IPF, would they?
No, and that's something for my kids. And we had a terrible rule change this year, and I'm really unhappy with it, is they gave originally GAs, graduate assistants, that came back so they would have additional 2 years of schooling, were able to compete at Collegiate Nationals, just like a red shirt, just like that. And they changed the ruling this year where you only have 4 years of competing with USAPL. So if they do freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and they came back for a GA, they couldn't compete.
What if it takes 5 years to get the...
Couldn't compete because you exhausted your 4 years.
Oh, so I get it.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's the crappy part of it is because you will have kids who are like, I changed my major or whatnot, and they're still in school. In any other sport, they would still be able to participate in some manner if we knew that was coming, redshirt them or whatnot, or sit them. But that is...
so you can't even redshirt them?
No. At that point, then I'm having them pay for a year of schooling, right? And then potentially like, oh, well, what if you only do a semester, you only need a semester at the end, or at that final year, like, do we need to continue all the way to April? I would feel terrible making them drag out their funding for their education just to compete in that final one. That makes sense.
Yeah. So the other downstream impact of this is, I'm assuming that all the collegiate nationals, right? The lower meets, probably not so. They're drug tested, right? So if you have an aspiring, I like to try to keep the kids as drug-free as possible, you know, especially younger ages.
A decision for us to make later, not when you're a kid and very impressionable.
So that I can see that as this opportunity that the strong high school lifter, you know, gravitates that way, then you're kind of going to guarantee they're going to stay clean for another 4 years. You know, if they go to that
usually because they are tested often. And that's the one thing I do like about USAPL is they do have the 10% minimum at every meet is being tested. So even if it's a local meet, but you have your teens in there and open stuff, like, it's still nice to know that those kids, or even the people that hold it as a high ethical point, that it's being done. And that's why we get a lot of people with USAPL. Mind you, like I have competed in other federations, like tested, untested, like that doesn't bother me at all. It's the certain people that has these ideologies of like, hey, I want my kids to be in a drug tested federation, that like we have to kind of have that structure to supply to that demographic. So yes.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's from on that topic, if it's a gifted lifter, you know, I don't want to say genetic freak, right? Because they exist, but most are just gifted lifters that kind of pop through there. And they want to try to break all-time world records, tested or untested. I personally believe, and I've seen this because I've been around for so long, that the end result will always be higher the longer they can choose not to use. And I don't think that that message is resonating as hard as what it actually should. And we have proof of this if you just look at former IPF world record or world champions that have then gone untested, which is another interesting thing, because a lot of these guys, when they're the world champions, everybody's, they're beating this test and all, this and all this. But several have gone that other route. Yeah. And then here comes another 250 pounds on their total. And you're like,
how did that happen?
Yeah.
Maybe they weren't.
They just found better shit.
Yeah. More pure. So
maybe they actually were.
Yeah. Just
which,
super talented.
Yeah. Which provides that higher benchmark, you know, of what's actually achievable without using. Yeah. Which, you know, there's pros and cons of the discussion of PEDs being as open, because when you first came in, you know, it was just something that we
hush. You don't talk.
You just
And now it's a every other joke on a gym page is about trend. Yeah. So it's like, but recognizing, I agree with you. I think you see the shelf life of a lot of lifters that use early. Yes. Is exhausted early. Like you're not hitting. And I think a lot of, and this is just my ideology, it's not paper, it's not science, but I think we hit a lot of our stride in our 30s. I really think like that is where a lot of like that core strength comes from, their old man strength, I feel. And when we start having these young men and women use so early, like there are long-term consequences of like you beating up joints so bad that you may not be able to go that level of intensity when you're older. And I think social media does two really contradictory things with what we were just talking about. It lets these kids see amazingly strong individuals that they may not know are on substance or gear. And in their head, they're like, I can do that. And we know that there's so many people, if they say it and like out there, they'll find a way to do it. And then in the other aspect, we're like, hey, we need to keep these kids away from running early or using early, but it is now such a common topic that it's just like they're overexposed to it or desensitized to it. We're like, well, so-and-so's using or other people are using, right? It's like, it's a normal part of, I don't want to say this culture now, but it is like, I could go to probably pull up my phone, pull up 5 different gym pages and just scroll and see something related to anabolics.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So, but I think it does those contradictory things. That one's super amazing. It pushes our kids to a new limit of seeing what potential they could do. And I think what we saw in the last, 4 or 5 years, like how many 900-pound deadlifters and squatters do we see like in the same meet? It was like a big thing like 4 or 5 years ago. Like, okay. And next thing now it's common practice to see it regularly. And I think a lot of it is getting a lot of this exposure to these younger athletes, which I think social media is a large portion of that, and letting them see what that top end potential is. And a lot of people are now finding it and breaking that barrier.
So how do you go about navigating the conversations with the kids that you're working with? Because at the end of the day, the only thing they can control is how big their deadlift is. Right. And if it's 415, you know, or kilos, 440, you know, whatever it is, then the goal is to make it 450. You know, but they're seeing the 900s and all this other kind of stuff. So it's,
I have honest conversations with them. I don't hate on any lifter. I don't belittle on any, hey, if they are tested or untested. I'm very realistic with them. The conversation we just had about our shelf life of lifters, I let them know that. I'm like, I try to be transparent. They're adults now. And avoiding the conversation that we know is happening behind our backs is not me taking care of my athletes. Me making them aware to make smart decisions is the best thing I can do for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your ideology is not dissimilar than everybody I know, by the way. Right? You know what I'm saying? It's like you have this peak time period, and yes, it's going to vary from lifter to lifter, but the last thing that you want to do is to be broken when you hit 33 or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, if you can be the healthiest you are, and then that's when you kick it, or 28, whatever that range is going to be. And then you'll walk away from the sport with a total that's 300 pounds higher than what it would be otherwise. And
potentially be a legit competitor. And it's just that I think a lot of people that get into lifting or get addicted to lifting is we do see such significant increase so early when we touch a barbell or a weight. Like we grow like immediately after touching it, responding to it, adapting to it. And that's addicting where you're like, why can't I still have that same level of progress, that same level of condition all the way out? And especially this age group, like I'm having them from 18 to 22, 23. And we know during that time, like your beginner gains are going to drop off. So educating the kids and the process of like how to properly navigate fatigue, how to make sure that we are rebounding properly after a meet and not continuing to do what is, I feel, typical viewability for them. That like see it often like, hey, I went and did a meet. Let's go max out off after. I'm trying to teach these kids to be coaches after. And this is something now, like I have GAs on the team. I have 2 GAs. They're kids I will use intra-team. I will not recruit from outside. I develop these kids for 4 years in the system. I teach them how to coach, how my programming aspect is. Like that ideology, like I want these kids to be able to pass on when they're done.
Dave Tate here from Elite FTS to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I've known my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to elitefts.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu.
So when I have these GAs there, like I'm essentially mentoring them in how to coach as well. So you've been there a couple years now, 3 years? Going on 5.
So 5 years. So you've had a full rotation.
This year's going to hit me hard. Last year I had a couple so during that COVID year, I wasn't a head coach. And that was last year was COVID year's graduation. Now this year, the ones that are graduating are all the kids that were my rookie head coach season are the seniors this year. So I'm already getting like emotional thinking about it. It's,
well, it is, but if you're coaching them to kind of be coaches themselves, then the new ones coming in, just that coach's eye, it becomes easier on you in the actual weight room because you got other kids that are able to be able to help. And that's the same way that all other sports work, right? So this is when you're going to start to see this year, you've already seen it, right? But then each year moving forward, because you have the structure. You have that structure and you have the leaders to be able to come in. When it's first year, then it's a clusterfuck because you have none of that.
And I can see it from every fall introduction of the new students. And like I said, like you should notice it this year. And I do. My seniors have paved such a good path on what practice looks like, what proper, from my end, technique and form looks like. They reinforce things that I've taught them over the last 3 or 4 years. And now these freshmen coming in, instead of us having that delayed learning curve where I have to work with them, they're seeing something. And a lot of these kids are visual based. If they're doing that way or their back looks that way, I'm going to do it that way. And they do. And I'm seeing this year with my freshmen, we had kids that were coming in that weren't even considered to be point scorers or top placers. And we have, out of our freshman roster, I think we have 7 of the 12 kids that are potential point scorers, top 10. That's crazy, especially in a 75 kilogram class, a 67.5 and a 60, where peak of the bell curve, like where most of your competitors are.
So how did you guys go about developing that culture? Because you had to basically, COVID erased it all. You know what I'm saying? So it was a reboot, right?
They hated me.
Oh yeah,
Dave. When I took over, they were so pissed off. essentially Guillermo took a DOD job. He couldn't pass up. Him and his wife took a great job. He had to leave. And then I took over in November. So that was Guillermo's class for recruiting. And then I came in and essentially filled it in, and they just did not hey, this guy recruited me. Why are you here? Why are you telling me what to do? There were people that our first meet, the spines on these individuals, even though I was on the roster being paid for coaching, they brought their own coaches. They handled them there. And I did immediately I established not hey, this is how stuff's going to be. No, this is my position to run. We're going to have some type of structure. We keep going back to that, but there are rules to this, and teams operate best when they operate together. And that wasn't what I found immediately when I came in. It was a bunch of individuals, which we usually see in powerlifting sometimes, just a bunch of people lifting around each other.
Yeah.
And we needed to spot each other. We needed to be excited for each other's lifts, our PRs and stuff like that. And that first started with getting to know each other. And I feel a lot of the kids just did not interact. They didn't talk. And I can bullshit. If I see somebody who's uncomfortable, especially in my coach hat when that's on, I want them to feel comfortable in the weight room. My entire job is, how do you fall in love with weights like I did? That's all I want to teach them. So I think that energy that I brought to them made it very easy to break down those barriers of, hey, I am at his best interest. He wants me to do well. And I drove that in very early. I would watch their sets. I opened up our practices from a 2-hour practice once a day because a lot of the kids couldn't make it. And I was like, okay, I understand that sucks. All right, now we're going to do 2 practices next year. And this year I have 4 practices based around the kids' school schedules to guarantee they're not falling behind in academics, but to make sure they're getting one-on-one coaching time with me. I'm getting about 15 kids per coaching lesson over 2 hours. I can do a lot with that compared to a 2-hour block of 60.
So how long do you think it took you to go from that grind phase to this is working phase?
This year. That's just not a good question for me because I'm never satisfied in that aspect.
No, I get that, but there's a point to where you're like, okay, here's the flow is probably what I'm looking for.
I've stepped back and been able to smile at the flow, and and that's when I'm I'm being a weirdo. But no, there has been multiple times beginning of the season and this semester where I'm things are operating as I envisioned, and things are clicking very well, and kids are PRing when they're supposed to be PRing. We're not overshooting. Yeah, it had to be this year. And I think it was having my seniors be very efficient leaders, like Maxon Carnes and Caden Kohlhauer and Izzy Rivera and Zariah Valentine. Those guys killed it. And I could not ask for better leaders to be at the helm of the team.
Well, the reason I went with culture first is because that's going to dictate the training that follows.
Yeah.
Right? In any of this, culture and environment's the main driver because through that is where you're able to auto-regulate. They're able to regulate from there. So when you first came in, if we were going programming now, right? Yeah. Because you can have this, and I'm sure you've done this. You have this great plan, and you spend hours upon hours and weeks upon weeks to develop it. Then after the first week, it just blew up in your face.
Yep.
So when you first were rebuilding, let's use that word for the post-COVID type of thing, right? Because it's when you're an online coach during that time. Yep. So there's no culture, there's no environment. No. It's all kind of
that one-on-one coaching is, I can't put a percent on it, but dividends ahead of, if you have an online coach, it does not compare to somebody being in person, in your ass, tactile cueing. It is such a different feel, and I feel takeaway. And that may just be me, but I feel that in-person aspect has almost benefited my clients better. And I just may be a shitty online coach. I may not be able to relay efficiently communication online, but I know the athletes I have in person, we benefit from those sessions and that time together.
Yeah. So when you first laid this perfect plan out for this rebuilding phase, what did that look like before you had to change anything? What did it look like? So how was that structure? Was it basic long-term periodization with hypertrophy?
I program individually for every kid. My job.
Are there meets at the same time?
Teams. So we'll have men's raw, men's equipped, women's equipped.
Okay.
So, excuse me, this guy's got me. So I will try to not put every kid all in the same meet due to you know how much time has to go into getting the kid equipment and wrapping and making sure, like, how in the hell can we do that if everybody competes at once? So when we do, I'll have my coaching staff, and we have a lot of great volunteers that really help with the team too when we do our equip meets. But I try to get it where our equip kids are either a smaller group competing together with the raw, or the equip compete by themselves and the raw compete by themselves.
All right. Well, does that provide the opportunity for them to be able to help at their
Yes, sir. Okay. So I've had kids who have been equipped lifters who have transitioned into raw, and they're great knee wrappers. They're great for helping get suits on and shirts and stuff like that. So now we have this kid with this valuable skill set. I'm like, hey, let's free him up to help out. And they have made certain meets for me now where originally it was just me running around and just going crazy, where these kids are like, they feel taken care of. They feel like they have a specific handler for themselves, and they feel they're set up for success the best.
So for those that don't know, the equipped is going to be single ply with wraps. So
yes, sir.
That can get convoluted with multiplying and everything else out there. But I put that out there because my question is going to be, how does your training change between the equipped and the ones that aren't? Because it may not, because it is just single
volume. I think I look at my individual lifter. I'm going to call out some kids that just have like really bad endurance, and it's not them. Brogan Black is some kid that I work with who's a great lifter. He cannot do multiple reps to save his life. So when we look at our overall, and he's in equipped right now, he had low endurance based on a raw training. So me knowing going into equipped, like my top end sets cannot be 2s, 3s, whatnot. Like he would do much better on like 3 sets of 1 or whatnot. And then me giving him a lot more accessories just to pick up that kind of that back end of endurance for him. So then I look at somebody who is really great with my endurance piece, and that can be an Esteban Mallory that I have, and he can run 5s and stuff all off season and still be hitting PRs and triples, doubles, and singles going into it. So that, based off of how their volume is, I may keep Esteban at a top set of a 3 to 5, 6-8 weeks out, still pushing that, and Brogan being in 3 sets of 1. So I do look at the individual nature for the athlete, their build, and equipment that they're in. It just requires me to do a lot of time outside of the gym to set up their programs for success. When we talk about the operational day for training, so we train in a facility called 9 for 9. I talked about Cody Porter previously, my old training partner. He owns this facility, and this is where we operate now. It turned out to be the best case scenario for us. We needed ERs. We had lifters that were 44 kg, and then we had men that were 140 plus kg, 6'3", and operating on the traditional racks of like, hey, this is a 2-inch or a 3-inch jump for those racks, wasn't feasible. Worked with Cody and Travis is the other owner. They set us up for success. We've been up there training, so I can make training specific all season long for these guys. We got specialty bars, we got cages, pins, road racks. So like me having this as just my sole job does make it very easy to provide that structure and variety of training for these kids.
How do you try to group them? How many optimally would you like in each group?
So our time slots are 2-hour practices. I like about 15. I really don't want to get to the 20, especially if I have equipped and I'm wrapping and stuff, or I'm helping get stuff on. I don't want to be where I'm just running in the person and cannot give cues or actually coach. Like I'm there to coach. I'm not there to put equipment on. I'm like, hey, we need to work on, hey, are our hips opening enough? Are our lats packed? Like, are we doing these bare minimum things to progress? And I don't want to look at my role as a coach just as an equipment person putting it in. So again, we talked about the kids who have helped out and transitioned over that are becoming more and more mature with it. They've been a valuable piece to it. But when I look at the training structure, I pair my weight classes and equipped people together.
Yeah.
So I'll put Brogan and Mo. So Mo is my 140 plus and Brogan is my 140 equipped. Relatively close to the same numbers. So both very slow at warming up. Both have terrible conditioning and endurance. They're there together for a reason, because I know that the pacing they're going to need between their breaks and those things will set them up for success. And they've turned into this year, like their numbers have skyrocketed. And I really think it's their iron sharpens iron. And if you have somebody very similar to strength and very similar to like where you're at, I think that's going to help push you. And they've done great together.
Do you think that you see a benefit in having them train with each other than if they all did their own program by themselves?
100%. The camaraderie and the support, the spotting, and we can't have somebody getting in, hey, we're breaking in a new suit, and like you have one back spotter. Like they have to be supportive of each other. So they are. I think they are definitely there pushing each other. I think they have gotten better by having that other person to hold them accountable. If you have somebody on platform with you and you're sandbagging and this other person's busting ass, like you're either going to feel guilty, or I've taught my kids to be sarcastic enough to call them out for being lazy. So
how do you set up the program leading into a meet? So let's 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks.
So
granted, meets. Actually, no, because you can pick the meets.
Yes.
So you can pick exactly where you want.
And I'll have a season set out in spring.
Yeah.
So for myself, I can start reverse programming from that point to be able to have a successful off season to where I can bridge my volume into 8 weeks. So I don't have to look like, oh no, now we have a meet 12 weeks out or 10 weeks out that I want to do. And I have to figure out how do we transition into this. Yeah. I can have smooth sailing of transition of long-term periodization, linear most likely until we get into those last 8 weeks. And then I'll do I like exercise selection. I like different specialty bars. I like accommodating resistance. I like that style of training. I don't like us to stick to traditional, hey, we're just doing barbell training, just barbell or traditional back squat or traditional bench. I like variety and exercise selection with it. I think from my end as a programmer, that's where I excel at. And that's how I break down a lot of our deficits to progress on.
So your end season would be 8 weeks.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then when you go into that end season with the different bars, is this, because usually as the meet gets closer, specificity.
And that's when I start to bring it. About 8 weeks is when I get more and more specific.
All right. So the bars are more in the off season part. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So when you're going into that 8 weeks, is it, you kind of already mentioned some people are going to be at the 5s, some people are going to be at the 3s. Yep. Some people might start at 2s from the very beginning if their strength endurance absolutely sucks and they're using gear. And then you just back off, wait from meet day.
I'll have specific testing days, and this is probably my only thing I like to generalize, and it just provides a little bit better predictability for attempts heading into the meet. Is we do and this is a lot of literature, final deadlift 3 weeks out, final squat 2 weeks out, final bench 7-10 days out. And that makes it very easy for me to gauge the recovery. I normally give 4-week blocks, us hitting our heaviest loads that week 3 or 4 for it. So it's easy for me if I reverse program to see like we're at our strongest in week 3, we're going to go into our week 4 deloaded. We should be relatively fresh. So when I look at that model for those guys, that's kind of how I run it.
So when you pull back from the deload before the peak before the meet, right? Deload peak, same thing. When you pull into that, so you're that one block separated from that, is your singles, triples, is that where you're focusing?
Usually so and it depends on the athlete again. So if I'm having someone like it's singles, usually I'll have a 7, 8, and a 9 testing throughout those 8 weeks just to figure out, hey, what's an ideal opener? What are we setting up for our RP8 next week, just to kind of build that momentum setting up into the week. Singles do turn into our top sets for the testing period. Depending on my athlete and their endurance, I'll do back off base percents usually. So like, all right, he's great with endurance. We can usually handle a higher load. We're not going to be as fatigued from that single. Something as much as like a 10% back off as if I know my athlete well. And if it's somebody where we just talked about Brogan and Mo, they're probably going to be about a 15% back off to make sure that we can get quality reps in.
All right. So you're working off RPEs.
Yes, sir.
Right. So in that block there, the RP is what, 8.5? Something around there, maybe 9.
Yep.
And then the back off, I'm glad you noted that the back off set is based upon the actual weight that was lifted, like 10% less.
It has to be. So many of these people come in with projections or what my projected max was. If you go in and you hit a RP7 at a single and I have, 90% at a 2x2 or whatever, your 7 may have been that 90%. Now you're just doing multiple sets of the 90 and there's no back off for fatigue. There's nothing that's going to focus more on your technique with reduced load.
Now, with your new lifters coming in, so the ones that you're just starting to work with, how do you go about anchoring the RPE?
Love it. Dude, this is fun, Dave. Like this is for like when I've been working with my GAs on this year's, how do we provide like this coaching structure to these new athletes coming in? Yeah. We usually have our recruiting roster done by May. We'd have video of them lifting or some type of meet to be able to see how they're doing. So based off their video models, their previous training, if they're okay with it, their previous coaches, I always ask if the previous coach is okay with me seeing kind of like how their volume model was or what they were highly responsive to. I can carry that and we can have continued smooth training. But if they're unable to give me any type of previous, like, hey, this is what I was running, or hey, I was just YOLOing it while I was lifting, then I will see where their deficits are at. We'll see like, hey, a very basic introductory block. When I talked about specificity heading into the meet too, that was something I wanted to circle back to, is I'll still have some straight bar motions about 12 weeks out for somebody, but they'll be a secondary lift to start to accommodate to them. So if I had a Swiss bar press on bench, like, yeah, we're going to hammer that just for the long range of motion, close, hammer triceps. But on my back off, I may have a competition spot out just to be able to like, hey, like we're feeling our comp grip. We're starting to engage that barbell pattern again. And then as we get closer to the meet, that will turn into our competition press. So where was the point before that?
The anchoring the RPE.
The anchoring the RPE. That is the hardest learning lesson probably through the entire year. Yeah. It's even now as we go into, because most of the kids have had, when I run our meets throughout the season too, I never have them really grind early on in our fall. That's our qualifying totals. Let's figure out what our programming block needs to be heading into the biggest meet of the year. So based off of that is how I'll go into approaching their RPEs. But when they come in, they have no real concept of it unless I coach them for high school nationals. Now I have had some kids that get with me early. I do help take them to that and they learn my structure early. But coming in, some of the kids don't even want to train over summer, which is wild to me. Like if you're going to a collegiate stage and not trying to like better yourself, or I've had kids just like, they show up to report day, they're like, I haven't lifted since last May. It's like, yeah, and that's a red flag immediately for some people coming in. But when they come in, I am looking at, hey, where is our fatigue breakdown at? Do they need to learn better motion to bridge that to their RP? Because a lot of the ones where they're like, that was an RP 9, like, well, you lost tightness, you lost your upper back, you lost your heels. And a lot of it is I want them to learn that like once we establish quality technique, that your RPs will be much easier to gauge. So when they're learning their RPs when they first come in, it is more so I'm gentle with it. My biggest thing is I'd rather you undershoot than overshoot. And we need to get proper etiquette of how to move under the bar and bracing. If I can't teach a brace early on, long term, and we have to come back and revisit it under max loads, we're screwed. So that is something I really I love McGill's, I love Copenhagen's, I love side planks. Like I implement a lot of stuff so we can get a very well-rounded trunk structure. So that's how I kind of gauge RP coming in.
You noted that during the fall, it's the qualifying total. So if we're to look at this as, say, an annual plan.
Yes.
Right? And for some, that may be a peak, right? Because that's just where their strength is.
They may have to hit their qualifying total.
They may have to hit it, which is going to be RP. It's going to be a higher effort.
Yes, sir.
Higher effort. For others, would that effort be lower?
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it's almost like you have that 8-week prep phase, but it's really still not a full prep phase.
Yes.
Because all you're really doing is trying to get them to what may be their openers.
Yep. And I'll leave them, that block will be more of a bridge for them where, hey, we are just now like, we know that once we do this meet, we're X amount out from CNATs or their next meet. Yeah. So I'll use that as a bridge for them coming in instead of us truly tapering to a single. That meet day may have been their first RP7 testing day. Like I'll know where their qualifying total is relatively, or I will scout out their competition beforehand and know kind of what their ceiling is that they need to hit to win. So when I plan that out, that allows me to, all right, say Mo, super heavyweight this year. We had a kid that was very, very close behind him. So his fall meet, we had to really push. We ended up not chipping him. The kid ended up shooting for the stars on his third attempt, but Mo also had to compete shortly after. It's like, there's no point. We still end up securing that meet. We still took first in it, but those couple extra kilos that could have potentially buried him would hinder our training heading into the rest of our block into CNATs. And that's something that I'm trying to get a lot of the kids to understand early on is these meets, as long as we're intelligent about our attempt selection, we can still place very high. we can PR 1 or 2 lifts throughout and they not be true PRs and ride that momentum into CNATs. And that's usually how our structure is. I'll have slingshots, say in fall, or during that peak of heading into to the meet, or I'll have kind of overload, reverse band, stuff like that. But it isn't like that true taper where I put them on straight bar testing singles yet.
So if they're way over the qualifying total, in a way, this is just a modified off season with a little specificity you put in just to kind of get used to the bar.
Yes, sir. And then there may be a point where I'm like, hey, we're approaching this meet. We're going to start doing more of an SBD or SB or a BD day. And as we get closer to that, hey, they may have one day that's like, hey, like we know that you're really struggling going from squat to bench. Like your bench has a huge fall off after. Why don't we try to start to work them in the same day, see if we can build up a better relationship with it. But that will be something we implement heading into that meet as well. So we don't have to do full SBD days or full testing, but we're kind of getting a gauge where endurance is around with working loads on those.
So what would your off season then look like starting from day after meet?
Tell everybody take off. As CNATs, everybody has a minimum of a week off. If they want to go in, it is no fixed barbell motions. It's dumbbells or machines. I want them to try to relax as much as they can. Also, this is a time to kind of pick up volume because volume is about to come. So usually when we go into off season, I try to get people in 5, 8s, 10s. I want to build that endurance base. So when we come back and we start transitioning into our lower numbers, our triceps aren't the reason we gas out. Our delts aren't the reason we gas out. I try to make sure our endurance base motions are more in our off season immediately after.
So when you say 5, 8s, 10s on what?
Close grip board press, 2 board. We'll do floor press with chains. We'll do even some tap and go bench for deadlifts, 5s. Like deadlift 5s a lot.
Mechanically similar movements, but not the main movements.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Now movements that they would be stronger in or not as strong in?
I would need to see what lift we want to attack in off season. So I would look like, hey, we really struggle with bench at this. And then we'll find that one lift. And that is going to be our heavy push for off season. The other ones are going to be volume and kind of ride those out. We need to build better endurance, better hypertrophy, everything we need to be able to get us prepared for next season. But our lagging lift, the one that really just did not make rounds, that is going to be the one that we harp on the hardest. And you probably won't get outside of 5s with that. And we will go heavy as hell as much as we can with a non-specific motion as much as we can to either overload pec, overload triceps, delts. Like you may be in a high incline pin press or something like that where I'm wanting to push strength in those weak areas.
All right, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you kind of know probably even before the meet, but the meet will solidify that of what the main focus has to be on the off season.
Yes.
And that's going to default down into X, Y, and Z movements.
Yep.
And then as soon as the meet's over, you're going to start preparing them for those movements, but not hammering them on those movements.
Correct.
Right. So a block to prepare them for a close rep incline, if that's what you deem is going to be able to build whatever that weakness is. Is that?
Yep.
Okay. And that will be different with each kid, but the caveat would be they're training together. So you need to try to group the kids so they
off season's my most difficult time to have that stuff line up. When they come in, we have a meet September, October, November, usually. So we're usually in that point of we're all on the same bars, right? But also why I try to keep practice sizes smaller, because then if we have an open rack or a different bar use or whatnot, like, hey, hop over there, you have a specialty bar or you have chains or whatnot, and your training partner doesn't have those, you still have area to train to knock out that stuff.
Interesting, but they're still in the same proximity. So you do your set, then I do my set.
Yep. They go hand off for each other, spot each other. They help load each other's weights. Like it's good environment.
So same culture as if they were doing the same movement.
Yep.
Okay.
And they're literally maybe 10 feet apart, if anything, with it. Enough that they are still talking shit to each other between sets that far away.
And then once you get through, and this will pertain to both, actually it's going to be different off season, in season, but I'll let you answer on both. Once you get through the main first 2 movements, like the building movements, the most important shit, then what is the blocks that fall after those main movements when you get into the accessories, and how do you go about those?
the weakest link again. My first accessory selection usually is if we're going into, hey, glute ham, we're coming off a deadlift day, we're like, hey, glutes are massively underdeveloped, and we're going to pick another compound motion. Because if I were to pick my leading exercise selection after my primary two, it's still going to be a heavy compound motion.
Okay.
So it's going to be a leg press, a belt squat, an RDL, something in those manners where we're engaging a lot of muscle. So that number 3, number 4 exercise are going to be something that's going to be compound and still relatively heavy we can push. And then from there, I'm going to break down what did we use today. All right, we did bench. We need to reinforce some posterior delt. We're going to do some metal rows. We're going to do some face pulls, stuff like that, where I'm like, it is implementing some rehab in with our volume stuff. I'll have a lot of triceps in there. I love banded sets of 50 to 100, single arms, what we need to do. I like to, and this is from Dr. Mike, I like how we change the incline of the bench to do our overhead extensions. I love that and start implementing the kids. So depending on where they're weak at is I'll go from compound motions, push them, then I'll go into secondary motions like single lever or single joint motions, extensions, curls, even some GHDs will fall on further down or reverse hypers. And then I'll get into your rehab motion. If it's an upper body day, I'll do ITYs, that type of stuff will be my final motions. On lower body days, it's usually a carry or a plank or a hold, something like that. I want to reinforce, again, I've harped on trunk so much, but I want to reinforce a strong trunk when we leave those practices.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. So that there isn't necessarily a hypertrophy phase built in. It's built into the bottom of the training session. Correct. With prehab, rehab.
Yep.
It's all hypertrophy.
Depending on the athlete's tolerance and recovery, I will add more accessories in. I don't like to go crazy on them. I like to, for me to assign specific accessories. It won't be like, go do a chest press. You're going to do single arm dumbbell press and you're going to alternate arms because we're really focused on more time under tension with it or more of that stress. Hey, you're going to do single leg extensions because I want to focus more on us getting VMO development than anything else. They will be specific assigned hypertrophy exercises and they will be a harder RPE if we're trying to build more of that muscle.
So you have them working in the off season because we're looking at 6-7 movements.
Yep. During
that time period. Now, as they get into the 8 weeks out, does that trim down?
Yes. So if I have, say, off season volume at RDLs is a 3x8, we're going to drop down to a 5, or I'll give a window 5 to 8, but it'll be based off your fatigue. So I'll give you a 5 through 8 rep range, but an RP 7 or 8, right? I just don't want you exceeding so hard where we're not recovering for the next session. Some of these individuals coming in now, they've gotten so used to pulling and squatting multiple times a week instead of my traditional block coming in. And a lot of what I learned just from my coaches to me was hey, we're going to bench one day, we're going to squat one day. And it feels that this younger group is so used to now, no, I can do a SB day this day, I'll squat the next day. Their endurance to barbell motions is so much greater than what I ever remember mine being.
Mm-hmm. But when you transfer them over to what you're doing, what is their endurance when you start taking them out of those movements and they're going into the 6 movement day?
Relatively good. It's,
okay.
I'm going from,
yeah.
us going post meet into them.
No. They come into you and say they're doing 3 SBD days per week.
Yeah.
And that's all.
Oh, I get what you're saying. I call that a nightmare. It is I don't here's our ceiling and we're touching our head on it. What do we do? And I try to explain to the kids, and this is what I try to explain to younger coaches too. Specificity is great because we're going to have immediate adaptation to what we need. And we're going to have significant growth in strength very fast, especially the age group we're working with. But we're going to hit our ceiling so hard. And most of those kids are going to quit because once you get hurt or you taper out, you don't know now how to process training. You don't know how to work through it. And a lot of my kids do get upset sometimes. They're you're holding me back. No, I'm holding us back from potential injury. And we are not on the stage that we need to put it all out there. But a lot of those kids that come in with those SBD 3 times a week, I compromise. I feel I have enough years of writing programming. If a kid needs something a certain way, that this is a deal breaker, I'll say, hey, no, that's if they tell me hey, I need a max out every day on bench, I'm that's fucking stupid. We're not doing that, right? There's a fine line that I'll draw. But if they tell me hey, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and this helps me grow, I'm going to listen to them until I am proved wrong. And I feel with just, like I said, the years of coaching now, I should be able to adapt or build a program to make this athlete successful, especially if he's somebody I went after for talent. I have to be able, just like a skill position coach and anywhere else, like they have different skills to be able to coach those individuals. Well, I have to be able to do that. So if he comes in and he says, or she says, I need XYZ, I'm like, I'll try to work with them. I really will. But if it's a 3 times a week SPD, I'll probably back them off to squatting twice a week, deadlifting twice a week, and then benching 3, just putting them throughout and just trying to back off that frequency. Hopefully the volume's not super high either with that frequency, but hopefully just back off some of that frequency of those lifts and spread them throughout the week a little bit more.
So you basically, it's a long-term process to be able to migrate them into where you're going to want. And I get that because there's a mental side of all this too.
The trust process. And it's so hard for them to even be like, you're telling me to step back so I can get stronger. And that is a concept that at this age group is you can't fathom it. Like, why the hell would I do that? Yeah. So, but the ones, and I tell, like my kids come in, like your fall, you're going to feel like you're stepping back. It's like, but you're going to have some of the best meets you're going to have literally come that January timeframe when we have our collegiate cup meets or CNATs. And our completion rates, I'm a nerd like this. I'm like, hey, how many white lights did we get? If we win a match and we have a 91 or 93% success rate on white lights and we have PRs across boards, that's a good fucking day. That's when I look at stats and I look at completions. Like that's what I'm looking at for, hey, did these kids have a good meet? Did their program and off season translate well? And I think that really, for me, answers that question. Is like, we're still PRing even with this volume-esque in transition, and the kids are still in a winning system.
Well, they'll buy in.
Yes,
because they're getting stronger. I mean, overall, that's the key thing.
And I can control that too. And that's something from a coach's end, everybody. The hardest part is pivoting off of a plateau. You're like, well, now where do we address? And a lot of these lifters, when we get to that point, like that is the detrimental point where they can't continue anymore. So I think me able to control that and to maybe hold them back, maybe 5 Ts, 2.5 Ts, to be able to continue progression immediately into our off season. It allows that mental state for the lifter to stay high and stay focused on the sport because they know more PRs are coming after.
All right, you answered the question in regards to, how you anchor the RPE. The follow-up question to that would be, now, how do you anchor the fatigue management?
I'm really excited about this. I'm like nerding out over it. So I'll do a 4-week block and they have essentially the weeks laid out. Like, this is what I want. And I will revisit them week to week. They fill in their RP for me. I will see based off of what they returned information off of. And then I will get feedback for the next week. Do I need to, all right, we're at 85% for a 3x3. Well, that's an RP 6. So we know that essentially like they're going to be exceeding my RP. They're exceeding what would be a challenging range for like 3x3s. I know that their growth is going up. So when I would revisit that program for the following week, I would look, I'm like, all right, that percent is no longer applicable to my programming scheme because they're exceeding it. Right. So I'd be, all right, we're going to start just basing our 3x3 off of RP now. And then we'll have an ascending RP based off your 3x3. So it's my job to adapt weekly based off the feedback of what I'm getting from the kids.
And what are you looking for that feedback?
I have a note section in the bottom. I have an RP rating and a weight system where they will put the weight used, they will put the RPs, and they'll leave any notes with it. What I'm looking for is if I know we're in a volume phase and I know if we're supposed to be hitting, I'm recommending an RP 8 and they give me an RP 9 on week 1, couple things. We either deloaded too much, like the drop in percent or difficulty was too much to be able to rebound to that next week, that it didn't feel normal. It felt like a heavy transition, or something's wrong I have to talk to the athlete about. Like, hey, give me feedback, what happened? If neither one of those things are going on, then somehow I have screwed up on prescription on the load and that. That's where I'm like, the only thing I could come to if there's not a fatigue management issue, like the athlete isn't like, hey, I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, whatnot. And I looked at, well, my athletes give me the correct feedback, they've given me the things I need to account for this, then what am I doing in my programming that's not equating to this athlete to be able to hit those numbers?
How would you know then if it is the outside variables?
Conversation. I see my kids every day. And that's the good thing about the in-person coaching is either talking to them, I see them in passing, just the culture of the gym that we have for our practice sizes allows me to have that very close relationship with the kids. I know their grades. I know who's ineligible. I know who's midterms that they didn't show up for. I'm like, I know their family stuff. It's a very, when we look at the coaching structure, those things that allow me to know what's happening in training is greatly provided by the culture and structure of how our practices and teams set up.
All right. So let's say they come in and they're a mess, right? Not a total mess. I mean, a total mess, it's a day, moderate mess. You can tell by their nonverbals when they come in that it's not on point. You can tell by their warm-ups it's not on point. Do you then, because you have many options here, you can adjust the RPE of the main lift, or you can still force that main lift, but adjust everything that happens after that main lift. So where are you going to go with that?
Depending on my athlete, I'm going to look on like, okay, is this an external factor where like if they're struggling with upper back and they can't keep it, is this something I'm going to potentially put SSB bar on just to have that external reinforcement of, hey, stay a little bit more vertical? Or is it going to be something when I look at, repeat the question, Dave, sorry.
So they come in and non-verbally, they're not on point. And they start their first movement and you can tell through the first movement, I like to look at this like a video game. Like you want to come into the training session with like 80% energy bar. Yeah. Right. And then you don't want to leave. You don't want to take all the energy out, in a session. You want to leave a little bit so you can recover for the next session. But they don't come in at 80%. They come in at 50. Yeah. Right. So you already know. Yeah, I can tell. You already know instinctively as well. Something has to pull out that day. Yeah. Is it going to come from being pulled out of the main lift, or are you just going to drop secondary lift?
If it's a newer lifter, I will have the conversation of that RPE will be graded off of your technique. And if they come in and they're not moving well and we're like, hey, like this is breaking down, like we need to go to only the weight that we can hold X, Y, and Z accountable. And that's where our fatigue management would come in. So we would greatly reduce, we would say the RPE, but ideally I still want them to stick to what is challenging to maintain that position of motion.
So the RPE would then become far more technically based?
With our newer lifters.
With the newer.
And once I start and they're in system, my junior seniors, and we're learning how to move, then I'm like, all right, that's not a true RPE base, because we've had so many hours of reinforcement of that's a good lift, let's fix this. But my younger kids, I guess I give a little bit more grace to, where they're like, hey, we need to really work on reinforcing how we move. Let's just focus on doing this, keep our chest upright, let's lock our back a little bit more, better depth, whatever we need to work on. And then that will be our primary focus around the RPE. When we have those days, I do stress that we push accessories. We can't have such a day where it is such a step back where we are just like, it really wasn't a working day. I lost a day of training. So I'm like, if we step back in that, I'm like, we definitely need to make sure that your 8s in leg press, they are an 8 and that you're pushing it. Like, all right. Yeah, I try to make up on that and that.
So you'll pull back on the main movement.
Yes.
And then keep the others.
Yep. And try to make up for that, I guess, amount of fatigue they would have endured with the heavier load. I try to hit that on the accessories followed.
What are the most common technical breakdowns that you see in the squat?
Oh, the thoracic. Thoracic is, I don't think too many people, for myself, I think there are staple exercises for thoracic that should be implemented. Like I love SSB. Like it will be always in the kid stuff. I love Zercher carries. I love stuff like that can help reinforce it. And some of the kids have never even held in a Zercher position. High bar, even that elevated position, most have been cramming that bar down on their back for so long. Even that little bit of range of motion that could condition a little bit more has not been implemented. But it is primarily the biggest deficits I see. Very, very poor bracing. I revisit that, like non-existent, belt overly tight just to maintain position. Thoracic have no awareness when they come out of the pocket of how their elbows are kind of just unraveling, which is resulting in that kind of kyphotic fold. And then feet are shit. Like it's really bad, but like the concept of rooting or keeping your whole foot engaged it's the whole tripod concept I do teach to the kids, but I'm like, to have your whole foot, and I'll have some kids where they're on a toe or literally just on their arch. I'm like, how can't you feel that? Or how is that not a concept like, hey, like if we have more foot to push through, you're going to have more power. And that's what I'm trying to teach them too, is just like, how do we just have a better foundation or a better base or stay more stacked throughout a lift? And it sounds very simple, but some of these kids are so naturally talented. Simple goes a long way, where if you can rein in how strong they are and you actually make them learn how to brace, actually carry the load over your lats and hips, like that is going to pay dividends for some of these kids who are already placing top 10.
Yeah, the rooting thing drives me absolutely fucking nuts. It really does, because there's nothing easier to fix, because every exercise you do, you can practice it. If a dumbbell curl, a push, everything you can, there's no reason that shouldn't be able to be fixed immediately.
I'll come over to it and I'll pick on the kids. Like if they're laying down doing a bench or something like that, or doing, and I can like slap your knee and your whole leg's moving. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Yeah. I'm like, you're carrying that on your spine. You have no base to push through. Even on dumbbell motion, like you said, on a dumbbell bench, like, you get so much, even an overhead, so much drive or just additional push through it, where we can push weight or push reps. So no, I think that the feet are a huge aspect we see with very young lifters. But they also try to cram into shoes or ollies or things that is just trending that doesn't even work for them. So I try to get kids to learn from, I like Notorious Lifts. I like them a lot. They sponsor the team. The reason I like them is they're minimalistic, and I like us to kind of feel the floor more. So the more we can feel the floor, the more we can actually feel our feet, I think the better connection we can. And it's something where the shoe prescription, I think, can play a big part in that. We have a lot of kids that like to do barefoot. But right now, it's my big thing is like, we can't do that on the platform. It's such a unique feel doing it. But I'll get a lot of kids who are like, I just don't like wearing shoes. That doesn't happen, man. We can't do that.
Yeah, well, weights do fall on the feet too.
So weights, and then we're in public, and some of them got some nasty toes.
Well, the bracing is another thing that can be utilized in every movement you do as well.
Yeah.
So you spoke earlier about some of the movements/drills that you'll have them do for bracing, but how do you verbally go about explaining to them how to breathe and brace?
Positional. Most of them are tactile learners. Start off, I'll put them in the 90-90, put their feet up on the bench. If they have no concept of how to do it, I'll start to put them in the posterior tilt. I'm like, hey, this is kind of how we move our pelvis. Now I just need you to breathe your spine into the floor, and just have them sit there for a little bit, and we'll come back. Those are things we revisit. The outside stimulus, so we talked about the different bracings, like I teach them to brace by putting them in that side plank or that high plank or alternating feet plank. It's like I force the core to work so they can feel it first, kind of so they can engage it.
Well, the tricky thing with those movements is it's easy to cheat, because you can hold a plank. I mean, some people hold it for 20 minutes, but they're not bracing at all.
And I'll be a pain in the ass. I'll come over. I'm like, hey, your hips are too low. We're going to turn your pelvis under. If I see a lot of anterior pelvic tilt, a lot of belly button sagging into the floor, I'll put them where we need to. I'll put them in proper position. And I've taught a lot of the other kids, like, hold your teammates accountable. Like, you know what looks good, and they start to carry that over. And knock on wood, like, our injury rate is fairly good. So
now if we jump over to the bench press, where are the technical flaws that you see there most frequently?
Leg drive's non-existent for so many kids, which for me, like the leg drive and the rooting sets up your ribs and your arch and stapling your back. So without having leg drive, you have a dog shit bench. So for a lot of these kids come in, their bench is one of the things that we see the biggest progression on. Because again, I train under Josh. Josh knows how to do one thing. He trains bench phenomenally well. And getting these kids, my lightweight lifters now, to learn how to use their legs and learn how to really get their ribs into the press are seal rows. And that was something I got from Josh. Like, he killed me with them. Seal rows are a staple on my bench day. I think how they make athletes use their lats and elevate their ribs when they pull it into them, I think that is the exact reverse motion that needs to be taught with the bench. So when I look at breakdown of benches, they have no bottom, they have no foundation to be able to support their arch, and they have over tucking the elbows runs rampant. There is no good stacking of wrist elbow use to be able to use pec and lat.
How do you go about instructing them on the stacking of the wrist and the elbow.
That's for seal rows, and I swear by them. Seal rows for me is I will have them get close to the competition grip, and I will have them get to the top. And when they pull in, be like, do you feel that? And they'll feel it more on the inside of the elbow when they're doing the row. I'll put their elbows in a good position, and when they pull, they're like, oh, like those are my lats. That's my scap moving. So I'll put them in those motions to try to get them. Also, so many kids are focused on the S, B, and D. They forgot that their back, glutes, and hamstrings do so much work. They don't train accessories in them at all. Like once they're done on a lower body day, I'm not going to do a split squat or a reverse hyper or GHD. A lot of the age groups, I got my primary workload done. I'm tired. Let's jet. So I have a day, and I do back almost every day for my kids. I like having it in there, and I make sure back is hammered. And once they learn to connect lats and delts and rhomboids, like actually learn how to use that posterior chain, I think it benefits bench significantly because it's no longer the pec and the shoulder carrying majority of the load. It's that lat. It's carrying that down and assisting you at the bottom.
Now with your back frequency, is it primarily vertical pulls one day and horizontal pulls one day, or is it both all days?
I will see where we're weakest at.
Yeah.
Right. If it's lats, like, hey, and we need to do a vertical pull, we'll do that. If it's a mid row, if it's somebody like that where they're a conventional puller and I want to get more meat in the middle, more middle of lat, like I will do a lot more row variations. Single arm, machine. I love cable machine rows, and I like the mad grip variations just so we can get a little bit further back. I try to implement a lot of that stuff to try to get the back engaged with.
So you're just hammering wherever you see that weakness.
Yeah, the weakest point. Okay. It's just like, see it, check it off, let's do an exercise to see if we can accommodate for it. So depending on the day, I'll recognize, hey, maybe going into a deadlift day, we're not going to have a shit ton of back the day before. Like I will be mindful of those things. But if we're early on in the week, like bench day, if we bench first, we'll have probably lats, pull down stuff that was just engaged. We go into squats. Hey, I'm going to probably have a mid row or something like that. Just something that I'm still getting some back stimulation that I feel can contribute to the overall load.
All right. Now the deadlift.
Deadlift for me, I don't hit a lot of lat in. Like a deadlift for me, that's the day I'm hitting my GHD, my reverse.
No, where do you see the technical breakdowns?
Oh, the lockouts. Even on a stiff bar, slack. A lot of this overextending cue.
What do you mean slack on the stiff bar?
So some of the kids, they will squat almost. So we'll look at a sumo. If you can squat down to the bar and like you're still there and then you go to pull it and you hear that click clank. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And then, or I'm like, hey, do you have tension on the bar? They're like, yeah, I got the slack out. I said, let go of the bar. And they let go and they go nowhere. So, like there's no pre-tension essentially even in the stiff bar, even though the bar doesn't bend.
No,
like
but
we know,
yeah.
And the click drives me nuts. And that's the one cue I'm like, if you can hear it, I'm like, we need to be fixing it. And that's the minimum amount of tension we need to be putting into the bar. So I see a lot of that where we don't have proper slack engagement with it, overextending at the top because it keeps getting kids rise and fall of the bar. They'll get top and then they'll roll and then the bar drops like 4 inches. And like, it just is by rule book, by literature, it's rise and fall. We got to be able to hold it up top. But those are the big things that I see. Bracing, I'm just going to beat a dead horse with. But realistically, a lot of kids don't know how to pack their lats in the deadlift either. They think that how they packed, well, we'll say that the other way. A lot of young kids that we recruit have deadlifts. They learn how to pack their lats in the deadlift, but carrying it over into the squat or the bench, they don't know how to utilize them that way. They try to use their deadlift lat packing in the same manner that they will for their squat and their bench. So I think that's why the other two struggle more. Deadlifts are usually the ones when we get recruits in. The deadlift is the one that usually gets the least amount of focus because most of them that are coming to this level at least have that one kind of locked in.
That's interesting, isn't it?
It's weird.
Because if we go back a decade, the bench was the one that was always locked in.
Yes, and that's to see it now where they come in, I'm like, these kids are insane, like efficient. Like when they go to pull, and some of my sumo pullers coming in, my lightweight sumo pullers, it's insane to me what they're moving and how technically sound they are. Like there is not a wasted amount of space or energy coming up to it, and it makes me very happy to see that maturity at that level.
Where do you see collegiate powerlifting, basically your sector, where do you see that going? If we were to say 5 years from now,
I like to be optimistic and I like to think that hard work will pay off. I think what's going to happen is we had 3 more scholarship schools pop up this last year that I've recognized. that I think in 5 years, we're going to have the potential where all scholarship giving schools are kind of put in their own brackets. I think that's where the competition essentially will lead to long term, because as much as clubs are great for the sport and awesome, those clubs now that can pay, or the scholarship giving schools that can pay, are going to go and cherry pick where the best lifters will go. And I'm not saying it'll eventually kill the clubs, but the lifters that were essentially making these clubs more credible, that they'll be in these scholarship giving schools. So I think we're going to see better brackets. I think we're going to see, what is it? Non-compete law, not non-compete. What is it? Where you essentially compete with a school for free and they compete for free with you. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's escaping me. But it's just like a competitive offer, where it's something we don't see now, that meat prices have gone through the roof. If you haven't been able to sit, like, well, why in the hell are we paying $200 for a local level meat and stuff like that? So I think when we look at like, that's going to have a big impact of it as well.
Were there any topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
I enjoyed talking programming, shooting shop. Like, that's fun to me. Like, they took a lot of stress off too. So, no, realistically, it's like, if you're interested in collegiate powerlifting, as many as any sport, we have to focus on our grades. There's a bunch of amazing programs out there. If you're looking at Powerlifting America to go the international routes, like Jeff Frank in Ottawa, that's where it's at. Like, I'll give shout outs to collegiate powerlifting because I want the sport to grow. If you're looking USAPL, there are so many schools now that give scholarships. I just think that this is where the future of the sport lies. If we can build this here, it already teaches great team structure. We're looking at point scoring systems. We're looking at ways to make where instead of just one person lifting, that you have ties for 15, 20 people at the event. I think it has the capability of making it very exciting down the way. Do I know how it's going to turn out? No. Do I have the right recommendation for it? No. But I think what we're doing right now is on the right path for that.
So if I'm a high school powerlifter and I'm aspiring to that, then the grades, you mentioned that, right? So what kind of GPA?
Give me a 3.0. Give me a 3.0.
3.0. And then, wow, you could say it doesn't matter. It's going to matter. What federations should they drift towards?
None. And that's why I'm going to say, I like me. No, I am not a fed snob. If you lift and you train hard and you're a good athlete and you're a good kid, I don't give a shit if you lift in your backyard. I found kids that have lifted with no federation that I think are talented that I brought on. Like, no kidding. And we've developed them.
What would be red flags, right? So you're looking at a kid, right? And they all have social media now.
Excuses. If you have on your social media, wasn't the day I wanted, and I can repeat that 20 times, but I've went and looked at recruits, and if your meet history is full of that type of stuff, of not days I wanted, you're telling me a couple things. You're very much an ego lifter. You can't follow a game plan, or maybe you are just so novice and nobody's shown you what to do. If I have conversation with you and you show me that you're not adaptable to being coachable, the rest are red flags. And I've had some kids that my gut is usually the right feeling with this. I'm like, nah, we can bring them in. No, if they have those symptoms early on, I try to give them a year. I'm like, hey, look, I just need you to trust the process. Let me see through programming. But we've had kids that don't adapt well to the team environment, that can't be a good teammate. The kids that come in and know this is a collegiate team, that we're doing this together, that the only way that we play so high on the collegiate stage is as a group, that they come in and they think that their one position or their lifts are more important than the next. And that's why I like the team-based setting. Is it's not like that anymore. It's not like I'm top dog, that person's top dog. Every individual on that team plays a major factor in our placement.
What if you're going through their Instagram and all their squats are high?
I can coach that. If it's like higher than a camel's butt, that's different.
Yeah.
But if they're down and like, hey, justifiable, I can work with that.
Okay.
I can coach, and that's why I've taken walk-ons for us, even with this being a good program, and a kid shows me that they love the sport. Well, I love the sport, and I never would have got recruited when I was younger. I would have sucked compared to my competition. But to know that somebody's like going to help develop me, Trevor Bram said he is somebody who was a walk-on, his numbers were not going to be the potential for Raw. He's like, well, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to try to go to CNATs. He got it equipped, busted his ass for equipped, hit the non-team qualifying total, which is hard as fuck. and he got there, and he's at CNATS with us. He's on the team now. So I will take walk-ons as long as they are hard workers and they are good kids.
All right. Now, would you say that their social media can be a net positive because it's going to give you something to look at?
If you are, so I'm going to say it in two ways. If you are 18 and already a coach, you just have to be mindful of the market you're doing. I don't care that other kids at that age are like, oh, I can coach. But you also have to understand that the program that you're coming into, you're the coach's athlete now. So you have to be coachable. When I see a kid on social media that could be a green flag, they can be coaching, but they're highly receptive to outside input. The opposite end of that is if they are an online coach and everything's controversial. So you'll see them post, they're like, well, this coach is an idiot, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, that is not the etiquette. It's not kind of the direction we want the sport to go. You're contributing to already the failing system with it. So I will recognize, like, being a coach at that age is not a good or a bad thing. It's how your behavior is around that with it. And then social media on a good side, if you are reinforcing like, hey, I'm going to these meets, I volunteered at this meet, hey, my GPA was this, like just being, not even a bad way, like you can post pictures of your cats. Like there's nothing on that is going to be a red flag in that area outside of highly controversial stuff. Green flags are kids that post their training, make sure they're accountable for their training, and just not doing silly stuff. It sounds so simple, but that's it. And it's not a recipe for anything crazy. Just don't be dumb and don't bully people online. And so much as that is, if a kid is comfortable calling someone out online, like you suck or your squats are trash and all that, like there's a point, but then there's some that I've caught, like the amount of online BS that you're saying, you're coming to our team, that's going to follow you. Yeah. And we had a young man last year, because of his outside conduct, we had a parent message us about their Instagram stuff, and I hadn't even recruited the kid yet. They're like, just so you're aware, he's saying X, Y, and Z online. So, and it's not even me searching for it. It's other people where like, once you say, hey, I'm committed to McKendree powerlifting, people are going to be like, hey, you're acting like a fool, then hold you accountable.
So a one-off post here and there, not a big deal. But if it's a whole frickin' profile.
No, if it's your personality, I have to assume that it's problematic. I have to assume that's who you are, right? So if you can paint a better picture, and I've been deceived plenty of times, but if you can paint a better picture of who you are as an athlete in person, it makes it easier for me to find you relatable to recruit.
Yeah, you just made a really good point. So the more authentic they can be, because I can see this scenario where you're watching the socials because that's probably the best way to figure out who they are. And then you're going to form a perception of who they are. And then you're going to sit down with them. And if that's gap between those two things are wide, then there's a red flag.
Yes, sir. And I had one this last year where the social media had me like, this kid is going to be one of our number ones. He's going to be amazing. We met in person and there were just so many behavioral things. It's like, maybe this is just like him being a little weird. Maybe it's this, but then we did a second time around and it was just no. It was no, these things are standing out. Like I can't shake them. I can't work around this. And I think my overall goal is to make the group, the team, happy, their experience. And if I have one or two outliers that has ruined the entire experience for everybody, I can't have that.
Yeah. I mean, that can ruin the whole thing, even if the person can be an all-time world record.
100%. Yeah. And your points don't matter if everybody around you is unhappy and wants to leave.
Points. So elaborate on that. So how does this work with the points?
We get, so every team, we're able to submit a point scoring roster going in, which is 12 athletes. They'll take out of those 12 athletes that you pick your top 7 scores. So first place will get 12 points, second place, 9 points, 8 points, so on and so forth on the way down until you get to 10, and 10 is 1 point. And then,
Yep. That I didn't know, but that makes sense.
And it makes it where when we talked about the team aspect of it, and when we go to the final judging of it, like, okay, well, you had 4 people between 3rd and 5th, but this team had 1 first and 4 fifths. Like it adds up relatively close.
Wow, that puts a whole nother layer to handling people at a meet.
Oh, Dave, that's what gets fun, dude. Like so fun because you're sitting there running, and Stacy Burr helps us, and her first year with us, she was like, "What the hell is going on?" Because we're running to platform to platform. We would see, hey, hey, we need to get this deadlift attempt. Essentially, we need 2 more points. And we won. We chipped a team 2 years ago by 1 point to make to podium. So when it came down to our final deadlifter chipping a 4th place and going to 3rd for us to secure that other point. So it adds another level of stress, but it's another level of excitement that I think is really fun with it.
No, that's cool. That's cool as hell, because it does add that whole other layer. Obviously, you're going to need more than one handler for everybody, because there's no way you're going to be able to do
No. And as much as I game plan this team heading into it, and I'll have kids' attempts laid out, in my backpack, I have like they're projected for the top 7 teams heading into this, like based off of their current qualifying totals on team, off of UTSA, how many kids are within the top 10 for points. I went through and did all that. So I try to be on top of that stuff to set us up for our success on meet day.
No, but that can bring up other scenarios too, to where it could be a guaranteed 3rd, or you take this risk for 2nd, but it knocks it to 4th, where it's easier just to take the weight that's a little bit more manageable.
And if you drop a lift on that, Dave, no shit, you will lose 3 or 4 slots. We had 2 ladies last year looking at fighting for 5th. They were doing amazing. Both of them missed a deadlift, dropped them like 8th and 9th. So like when we look at your top 10 and point significance, it's huge whenever we miss one lift. So it's like when we talk about 9 for 9 kind of on this stage, it's very different than like, well, you still went 5 for 9, but had a PR. Well, yeah, but we just left 8 points on the stage for the overall team.
So how's that play into the individual? Well, this goes back to the recruiting too, because if you have somebody that's an ego lifter, but you're asking them that you only need to pull this, but they want that PR, but that PR could actually cost
the relationship with each athlete. I have athletes that trust the process, that no matter what I'll give them, they will be 100% good with. I have athletes I have to sit down and I'll have to create a game plan with them to make sure they're content with how I'm meeting them in the middle with the team. Because I did ask them to come here, and this is not a dictatorship. This is a family and this is a team. Like, we need to do this together. So I will talk to them like, hey, what are your goals for this meet? I'll have my goals set out for them. And realistically, if they don't line up, like, we need to figure out how we meet this in the middle. I need you to get this qualifying total to secure these points. How do we get there? And I'll sit down there and I'll game plan with those kids. And even if it's me securing our qualifying total I need on our seconds, like we do a little bit heavier opener to get to that number we need, I'll run that scenario and let them shoot for a 3rd. As long as the 3rd I know is not going to be so over the top that they could get hurt.
Well, they also have that opportunity with the off-season meets if it is a single.
Go test it there.
Then take a lighter squat and go for broke on the deadlift. So it's kind of built into the whole system. How can people go about finding you?
Excuse me. So a couple places you can find us. McKendree.edu is our school page. If you need anything with that, that is academics kind of enrollment. If you're looking at our team page, it's McKendree Powerlifting on Instagram. Same thing for Facebook. We don't have, what is it, X now? We don't have that. And then my Instagram as well is Coach Bradley, Bradly, no E, Bechel. And then find me if you're interested in the school. Like, I'll talk to anybody that messaged me. I like it. I like to talk about it. I like to share it. So those are the main places you can find us. Besides that, like, I love sharing the sport. If anybody else ever has questions about it, it's not even about recruitment, but like, how do we even start a club or a powerlifting scholarship or fundraising where we're at? Like, I just want to grow the sport. So long-term, this is a real thing for us.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming out. This is great. Do you have any final thoughts?
I am beyond thankful to be here. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the kids on that team. They put me in a position to love what I do. So I'm very happy.
All right. Well, thank you. And we're done.
Thank you, Dave.
All content you see on this channel and at elitefts.com is created by, take a guess, Elite FTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to elitefts.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.